I think there's a real opportunity for students to explore their learning variability, to kind of see what they're good at, what aspects of activities are more challenging for them, and what skills they want to improve, and see how Gen AI tools can support them in that process.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Dr. Gina Tesoriero about a topic that comes up more and more in my conversations with educators, which is AI and special education. Gina recently completed her PhD in learning sciences and human development at the University of Washington, and she brings a decade of experience as a middle school special education teacher, along with her time as a district EdTech implementation coach, both during and after the pandemic. Her dissertation research is what we talk about in today's episode. It's centered on co-designing with young adults who have special education and neurodiversity experiences. It explores the perspectives on ethical use of AI tools like ChatGPT with this particular group. And this is a great conversation, plenty of strategies, ideas, things to consider in your work. And I'm really excited for you to hear what Gina has to share. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you today about this topic of AI and special education. But before we get into all of that, can you share with listeners a bit, what is your experience in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
I recently completed my PhD in learning sciences and human development at the University of Washington. And I have a decade of experience as a middle school special education teacher in a public school setting, where I taught 4 major subjects as well as STEM. I also have experience as a district EdTech implementation coach during and after the pandemic.
Yeah, so just all of those pieces, from your background, from your work experience, are really informing our conversation today, particularly, right, some of the doctoral work that you've done. But before we get into those pieces, and kind of pull apart what that has looked like for you, how were you first introduced to AI, chatbots like ChatGPT? Where did this journey start for you?
Yeah, I was actually facilitating a place-based learning internship program where high schoolers worked with subject matter experts in our technology department. And they went through the design process to work together to solve relevant problems that they were experiencing with technology. And one of the high schoolers told me about ChatGPT, and we actually took time in our session to explore how it could be used to support them in their group work, almost as another group member.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I decided actually to go back to grad as reading and writing, as well as to help me too with struggles that I faced.
Yeah. And just that idea of having this like thought partner, this collaborator, watching high schoolers kind of make that decision, whether maybe it's, sanctioned in certain academic environments or others, where a student might just feel comfortable sharing some of the things they're playing around with. It's definitely a lot has changed in a short amount of time for students who may in the past have Googled something for support. Now they're doing things on a different kind of level than, I'm sure, in my experience as a student for sure, let alone right when I started as a classroom teacher. So your dissertation focused on co-designing research with young adults who have special education and neurodiversity experiences themselves and exploring their perspectives on ethical use of AI like ChatGPT. So what surprised you the most about how they were already using AI in their lives?
What surprised me the most was this tension that I kept seeing. There was kind of a push and pull dynamic between empowerment and anxiety. So many of the high school graduates were using ChatGPT in creative ways to build confidence, from explaining their needs to a teacher or a doctor, or as a non judgmental writing tutor, or to
Mhm.
support them during the job search process. But alongside that, there was a constant fear of getting caught.
Yeah. And I would imagine that, there's that tension, in situations where there might not be support or transparency. And even just like internally, like, what am I comfortable with? It's been really interesting to talk to educators. I was just in upstate New York, and someone was even sharing about, some of their colleagues, right, who are new to the workforce and, the ways that they are really navigating some of that tension of, what are they comfortable with? What are they not comfortable with using some of these tools for a variety of reasons. And when we think of AI as assistive technology for students with disabilities, I recently chatted with some folks from Beacon College on the podcast. What are some of the most practical, everyday use cases you're seeing right now?
I think there's a real opportunity for students to explore their learning variability, to kind of see what they're good at, what aspects of activities are more challenging for them, and what skills they want to improve, and see how Gen AI tools can support them in that process. Almost like being a detective of themselves to find out what they need and how this tool can help them. For example, this might look like a student figuring out that breaking down a task step by step really works for them, or discovering that getting their ideas out first and then organizing later is how their brain works best. And I think Gen AI tools can really support along that process.
Yeah. And just having, students having that sense of self-awareness of like what works for them, what feels like a good fit. And maybe this comes back to kind of that idea of the tension, right? What does ethical use of AI look like specifically for students with special education experiences? Are there unique considerations that don't come up in general education conversations about AI?
I think the idea of ethical use is really complex concept and one that's going to keep evolving.
Mhm.
But for students in special education settings, there are some unique considerations that I don't think come up enough in general conversations about AI. So a lot of these students are navigating intersectional oppression, meaning they're not just dealing with one barrier, they're dealing with multiple systems at once, like race, class, ability, language. And that matters a lot when we think about surveillance. Like these are students who
Mhm.
may already feel like all eyes are on them. So accusations of cheating or banning
Yeah.
tools that they could genuinely use for empowerment, those decisions, they have real impacts on students in special education settings.
Yeah. And
And
I would
so
imagine.
imagine,
Mhm.
so sorry.
No, I was going to say, I can absolutely see this, but yeah, please continue.
Yeah, just imagine a student who goes home, uses AI, and finally feels like they can do the thing that they've been
Yeah.
struggling to do. And then they come to class and they're told it's cheating. And so that experience can really create a barrier that shuts down what could be a very powerful conversation about how these tools are actually being used and what they mean for these kids.
Yeah, and just starting that conversation and say, like, how did this help you? How was this experience different? Like, how did this change, right, the way, as opposed to just going from, 0 to 100 in terms of yes or no. Like, this is a very, interesting kind of nuanced area where students might be able to, make a case, or maybe they don't even see it as making a case, but as soon as they start sharing, it becomes really obvious, like what that use case is. So, I know you've done, so much research on this topic. So can you share an example from your research that captures what it actually looks like to navigate AI use with students in a really thoughtful way?
Yeah, I had one participant in my study who I thought used Gen AI tools to answer some of the survey questions in a copy and paste kind of way. And I
Hmm.
actually knew this participant. He was one of my former students from my first year teaching. And so I've known him for almost 20 years, and
Hmm.
I could see some aspects of him in his response, but it definitely seemed like Gen AI did most of the work. And
Yeah.
I didn't know how to handle that situation. This particular participant was one of the leaders in the co-design of the research itself. And I wanted to maintain the strong relationship we had.
Hmm.
So instead of making accusations, I brought curiosity to how he was using Gen AI during the research. And by bringing curiosity, I learned how the research itself was creating barriers, and that he really just wanted to answer these questions verbally while I wrote the answers for him.
Hmm.
And approaching it in this way not only helped me create better research environments, but it allowed us to continue this conversation about how AI is being used. And that conversation is still very much alive to this day.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing too. Like, even just redefining how you might capture information, right, for a study. Like, am I going to get high quality results from, an audio response or dictation? Like, probably just as high quality, if not more so, right? When we remove some of those barriers, like, I don't know how to write this in a sentence, or I want to say this, but I don't know exactly, what is the right word to use here. And then someone just abandons, doing it in the first place. So I think it's really interesting to think about where this might fall in a variety of research environments, right? In addition to, the groups you're focused on. So, when we think of special education, sometimes we're thinking of a particular classroom setup or environment, or we're thinking very school based for those conversations. But we know, of course, that can extend, right? The support those students need extends beyond, a classroom or a school. So, what role should families play in understanding and advocating for AI as a support tool for their students?
I think the most important thing families can do right now is create the space at home to actually talk about AI with their kids. How are they using it? What feels helpful? What feels risky? What precautions do they take? Because AI is evolving every single day,
Mhm.
and there just can't be, it's just not a one time conversation. It has to be something ongoing. And the Day of AI and Common
Yeah.
Sense Media created tools specifically designed to support families in navigating these conversations. And they're really fun. They have games and
Mhm.
contracts and discussion prompts. And so I would really urge families to explore those tools.
Yeah, and as you're sharing some of those resources, which we'll link out to, I think, both the Day of AI, Common Sense Media, right? People might be familiar with Common Sense Media and not the Day of AI, but resources to explore for sure, right? Even just having that level of transparency of like, I'm going to use, this chatbot to help me figure out a problem that we have in the home today, right? Like, I don't know what to do, right, with all of the vegetables we got, right, from our CSA or something. Like, I need, right, to figure out how to use all of these, right, by the end of the week before they go bad. Or, I don't know what to do to change this recipe. Like, it could be anything. And for a family member to, kind of scoop up, right, bring their child side by side into that conversation to say, like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I wonder if this would work, or where can I fact check this? Or I wonder if this is a good idea. Like, and just have that level of questioning, of transparency brought in, is really huge. And, I think from a family standpoint, sometimes, it feels a little powerless. Like, I don't know what's going on, or I don't know what questions to ask. And, there may be some ways to bring that into the work, as well. And, for, someone who's listening who is currently, in a special education role, right? Maybe they're a teacher in an elementary or a high school classroom, and they want to start exploring AI, maybe with their students, right? As co-learners like you have, right? Or maybe it's more behind the scenes to start, where should they begin on that journey?
I think it begins with conversations again, because many of these students are already using these tools or they have very clear opinions about them. So in my study, I saw a full range. Some of the high school graduates I worked with were too afraid to even touch Gen AI. And then others were already building their own writing tutors. So I think ongoing conversations about the opportunities, the risks, safety precautions are the most important things for teachers and that they can bring into their classroom as we navigate the AI terrain together.
Especially for, students who might, and I've talked to families where, their children are like, I don't even want to touch this, right? Or I don't want to get in trouble, right? But perhaps, there are these moments where it can completely change the way they're interacting with content, right? Build some confidence. So it's definitely a space, I know I'm watching closely. I'm sure you're watching closely, right? With the special education lens, and wider, right? For AI and education. So before I, ask you to just make sure, people know where to connect with you, and kind of that question I always like to wrap up with, are there any tools you're excited about right now? Anything you've been playing around with, this school year, or, anything that as you're kind of playing with it, you're like, it's not quite there yet, maybe in the future. I'm kind of wondering, where your head is at with just the state of what's out there and what's available right now.
Yeah, well, for me, I have dyslexia and ADHD. And so I need a lot of help sometimes organizing my thoughts or, getting my ideas out there in the best manner. And I've used ChatGPT a lot, the free version, all through my dissertation. And I've just now experienced Claude. And I am so thrilled with the way Claude pauses and asks questions, asks you to prioritize things. And I just think that there's a lot of great tools out there that can help folks who just need a little bit more support to get their great ideas out there.
Yeah, what a good example too, particularly for our conversation today. Like that's scaffolding, right? That's built into Claude in particular. That's one that I've probably spent more time in the past few months than I would have said, a year ago. And I agree with you that experience does feel much more supported as you're moving through than, say, kind of the one and done feel, right? Sometimes of a prompt in ChatGPT. So where can people connect with you? Where can they follow along? Where can they learn more about your work?
Yeah, my LinkedIn is a great place for that. I shared snippets around all my research findings in my LinkedIn feed, and I'll continue to update as new ideas and opportunities come.
Perfect. So I will make sure to link out to that so everyone can click and follow along and continue to learn from you and your work. But Gina, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Monica.
It was so much fun chatting with Dr. Gina Tesoriero today. And let's finish up like we always do with a few key points to make this EdTech easy. First, explore how AI tools can serve as assistive technology for students with disabilities and neurodiverse learners. Lead with curiosity instead of accusations when students may be using AI in unexpected ways. Recognize that banning AI tools can disproportionately impact students in special education who do benefit from them. Encourage students to become detectives of their own learning by discovering how AI supports their individual needs. Remember, you can find the show notes, the full list of resources that Gina mentioned in today's episode, and all of the ways to stay connected with her work by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com and finding today's episode. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.